Hi, hello, привет and bonjour, here's Elizen back with the second technical detail of Factorio. In today's technical detail, we will be looking at some basic interactions with the circuit networks. In fact, we will be focusing on these 5 buildings seen right here. We will be looking at the wooden, iron and steel chests, as well as the combinator and the lamp. Now, first of all, I want to show you how these buildings change their appearance when connected to the circuit network. For this, I simply zoom as far as possible, and then you will notice that chests gain a yellow box on them, which has a small dot at the bottom. If we go further down here, then you will see that this box is in fact an indicator light, which is sometimes on and sometimes off. So, in addition to this blue indicator light at the bottom, we have 2 connectors, one at the top right and one at the top left. And if you look really closely, you will see that the one on the top right has a red ring around it, and the one on the bottom right has a green ring around it. And these are 2 connectors, and they indicate where the red and green wires will connect visually to this block. So if, for example, I connect a green wire up to this to these chests, they will connect to the green connectors on the bottom right. Now to the lamps, and here we have almost the same deal. We have a yellow box with 2 connectors which behave just like the ones at the chest, and in contrast we have a red indicator light at the top. This indicator light is red, but it sometimes can also be green, like seen down here. Now, lastly, the constant combinators don't change their appearance when connected to a circuit network. This is because they are intended to be used with the circuit network and therefore have already a green and a red connector on them. This means that connecting them up doesn't change their appearance, but instead connects the wires to the already existing connectors, like seen in this configuration here. Note also that constant combinators can be rotated to either visually please you or go with some predetermined alignment. And now that we know how each of these buildings act visually, we also want to know how they act logically. For this, I want to remind you about a few facts of circuit networks from my first tutorial video. So if you haven't seen it already, now is the best time to watch it. In there, I told you how red and green wires work, and that there are 2 main things that each building has to do, each tick, for the whole system to make sense. The first one is that each building must react to some signals given to it by the network. And at the end of each tick, it has to return a few signals to this network. So what we will now be doing is going through all of these buildings and examining how they do these 2 things. The second thing I want to remind you of is if we have a wire and we want to know which values are stored on it, we can simply connect it up to a power pole and then use the built-in visualization, which is seen on the top right, to show us all the signals that are currently on this wire. With that out of the way, let's first start with chests. Luckily for us, all 3 chest types behave exactly identically with respect to the circuit network. The only difference is in appearance and the fact that wooden chests hold only 16 stacks of items, iron chests 32 and steel chests 48. Also luckily for us is the fact that all of the chests simply completely ignore the input. This means that to understand how chests interact with the circuit network is completely done by understanding how they output their signals. And this is of course no black magic, they simply take all of the content and throw it out to the circuit network. So for example, this wooden chest has 123 iron plates in them, and it doesn't matter whether or not they are in one stack or in multiples like here. And then the signal is sent each tick as is to the circuit network. If I now add, for example, some copper ore on there, now the chest has 123 iron plates and 100 copper, and indeed the signal is now 123 iron plates and 100 copper ore. Note that the signal is green because it's coming from a green wire. Now also note that down here the indicator lamp is turned on, while up here it's turned off. The meaning for this is that this chest doesn't give any signals to the circuit network, or in other words, it's completely empty, while this chest is not and therefore gives some values to the circuit network. If we put any item in this chest, its signal lamp will also turn on. You can therefore simply leave your detailed view on, since seeing any item over the chest means that this chest will be sending signals to the circuit network, while seeing the chest itself means that the chest is empty and therefore doesn't send any signals. And that's already it for the chests. You now know how chests interact with the circuit network, and we can therefore move to our first real practical example of circuits. For this I want to remind you how the circuit network manages the output of multiple buildings, and that it simply sums up these outputs. And the sum of all the outputs of these chests is simply the sum of all of their contents, and this means it's simply the whole content of all of these chests combined. So you already see that this chest contains some iron ore and this one too, while this one contains only copper ore and some modules, which are also contained in this chest. If we open these chests up, you will see that the first one contains 25 iron ore, while the last one only 3, so in total 28. This one contains 28 copper ore, and it contains 2 modules, while this one contains 1. So in total we have 28 of each ore and 3 modules, and if we now look at the substations, we indeed see a signal of 28 of each ore and 3 modules. And with this example, I congratulate you on understanding how chests interact with the circuit network. Let us now move on to our next item on the list, the constant combinator. Like chests, constant combinators also completely ignore the input, so we will, without further delay, concentrate on its output. To explain this, let me first open up a constant combinator. There we will see a few things. The first is that there seems to be an on and off switch, which we will come later to. The second one is that it has a kind of chest-like appearance, and that we have multiple stacks here. But in contrast to a chest, our inventory isn't opened with it as well. So just to compare, I open a chest, now I see my own character inventory. Down here, I don't. Nevertheless, I can take items and try to put it in there. And what will now happen is that I didn't lose the item out of my item stack in my hand, but it seems like it did place the item here. More so, it doesn't look like an usual chest in that this item has now an orange backdrop. Furthermore, a number selector down here appeared. What does this all mean? Well, like I already said, the constant combinator has only an output, so if it doesn't take in any items, then these must be exactly the signals that the constant combinator will output. And our suspicion is also confirmed by the name that's standing on top of this chest-like appearance, which says simply output. If you look at the power pole, there we see that we indeed have now a stack inserter in there, but we have additional signals, which are coming from this constant combinator in here, which already has some inputs pre-selected. You may also notice that we have a signal of -5 in here, which we would never get with chests, since they will always send their content, and this content obviously is always a positive number of items. Note also that there is an orange backdrop behind these items, but if I click on one of them, the orange backdrop appears. Also the number selector appears, and this simply means that we have currently selected this item stack and therefore can change its associated number, which we also see down here, with this number selector. We can do this in 2 ways. We can either drag the scroll bar to the right and therefore increase the value, or we can directly left click on this number field and put in our number with the keyboard. Note that we can also simply put a negative sign in there and therefore get negative values. We can also put in the value 0, which oddly enough doesn't display any number up here. So let's leave it at -5. Now you may ask, to get an item in there, I need to put it there. So do I always need to craft it first to put it in there? And the answer is no. To choose any item you want, simply left click on any of the 3 spaces. So for example, I'll left click now, and this will open a menu that looks just like our crafting menu. And in here are all the item signals available in the game. In the vanilla game, this coincides with all craftable items, so all items will always be displayed here, regardless whether or not you have researched them or not. You may also notice that we have an extra item group in here called fluids, where all the fluids in the game are listed. And there is a further new group called signals. In here we find signals for every digit, every letter, and a couple of colors. These signals are usually called virtual signals, but I call them mainly control signals. This last item group down here is added by the attach nodes mod, which also adds this window right here. If you wondered what this was, this simply allows me to have all these nodes that you see down here, which also explain everything I tell you in great detail if you hover over them. This is for the people who may want to check out the world download of this world here and go over everything that I said more slowly and examine everything or play around with it. But now let's get back to the item signals. So to choose any signal we want, we simply left or right click on any of these item stacks. So for example, I want to choose green circus, so I simply left click on them. This will immediately put them into the slot that I previously selected and also immediately select this field so that I can modify it with the number selector down here. Now, it sometimes happens that you later want to change this value. For this, you simply left-click again on it, and then you can choose your new item signal. For example, I want to choose Advanced Circuits. Doing so overrides the old signal with the new one, and also resets its number to 1. Note though that I only needed one click here, because this item slot was already selected. If I want to change any other slot, I need to first click on it once to select it, and then click on it again to change its item type. I can also do this as fast as I want, so I can simply double click it and then get the desired window. I may also want to delete a signal completely from here. This is simply done by right clicking on any signal. It doesn't matter whether or not it's selected, it simply deletes it immediately. Note that right clicking on an empty field does not open the menu, you need to left click on it. You can also close this window like any others by pressing E. So, there you go. Now you know how you input any signals you wish into the constant combinator. Note that you can have up to 18 different signals in here, and they can have all pretty much arbitrary values. You may also notice that, like the chest, the constant combinator has a blue indicator light, which is turned on when the combinator is sending signals. There are 3 conditions for this light to turn on. All 3 of them must be met. The first one is that the constant combinator needs to be connected to a circuit network. So for example, this constant combinator isn't connected to any network and therefore it doesn't have its indicator light turned on. The second condition is that there needs to actually be a non-zero signal. So for example, this constant combinator is connected and it also has a signal, but the signal has a value of 0 and therefore doesn't fulfill the second condition. The third condition is that the constant combinator needs to be turned on. So, for example, this constant combinator is connected to the circuit network and it has a value of 1 for iron plates, but it's turned off. Turning off will also do exactly what it's supposed to do. It will turn off any signal sent by this constant combinator. So if I return to the constant combinators up here, this one sends currently 1 stack inserter to this green wire, and if we turn it off, the signal disappears. Note that this signal is sent continuously, so it's not a signal like I showed you in the first part of the series where I had a belt that sent its signal just a single tick once in a while. The constant combinator as well as the chests up above send their signals continuously. Lastly, only 2 technical details remain. The first one is what happens if you have multiple instances of the same item type, and the answer is that the numbers get simply added up and then sent to this network. So for example, we have 2 iron plates here and they are sent as 2 iron plates to this network. And the second technical detail is that this value saved in any circuit related thing do not have unlimited range. To be exact, their range is given by these numbers here. You can just remember them as about -2 billion to +2 billion. For those who know a little bit more about computers, may notice that this is exactly the range of a 32-bit integer. And this already concludes our explanation of the constant combinator, which you will use again and again as an easy and quick way to get a certain signal on a certain network. Simply plop down the constant combinator, choose your signal, and connect it to the destination. Let us therefore now continue with the third item on our list, lamps. In contrast to chest and constant combinators, lamps do not output any signals at all. This means that their only significance for the circuit network is their reaction to given signals. This means we only need to understand how lamps react to signals given to them. In fact, lamps react to signals in two ways, and for the first way there are again three subcategories. For this I will open up the lamp GUI, and there we will see that now that the lamp is connected to a circuit wire, a new part of it appears. On there we find first an enable-disable radio button, which we can't actually disable. This radio button here is only there to tell us what the circuit network does to this lamp. In this case, it enables or disables this lamp. And you may ask, well, but when does it enable and when does it disable? And the answer is, this depends on the values provided by the circuit network as well as the concrete properties of the lamp. We can namely choose when this happens. For this, we need to choose two signals, the left one, which I call the primary signal, and the right one, which I call the secondary signal, as well as a mode of comparison between these two. So let us start by choosing the primary signal. This field should remind you of the constant combinator, and indeed we can simply drag and drop any item stack in there and it will save the signal there. Note that there is no number associated with the signal, only the signal type itself. We can also clear this selection by right-clicking, and we can choose any signal we want by left-clicking and then having this menu where we again can choose any signal we want. There is one specialty about the primary signal though, in that we have two special signals called everything and anything. These two signals have a special role in combinators, which I will explain in the next video. For now, please simply ignore them and use all the other signals. For example, iron plates. Now let us choose the secondary signal. This can also be done by dragging and dropping any item stack in there, and it can also be deleted by right-clicking. By left-clicking, we also open the item menu. This will be the same as in the Combinator, but we will now have a second part down here. And this is again a number selector. This is because we don't actually need to use any item signal at all. We can simply set a fixed constant to use instead. For example, 5. By clicking on set, this number gets written in there. Note that this is the value 5, not to be confused with the signal of the digit 5. These are two different things, and please be sure to differentiate between these two. Now, lastly, we need to choose the mode of comparison by using this combo box here. Simply left-click on it will open all the possible choices, and we have 6 to choose from. To explain you these choices, I have set up a little visualization here. For this, I will show you first of all this column here. And this is to show simply all of the comparison modes, which is greater than, equal than, less than or equal, not equal, and greater than or equal. These signs simply tell us which row corresponds to which comparison mode. These lamps down here, they have all the same structure in that they have a primary signal of iron plates and a secondary signal of a constant. Which constant is used is dependent upon the column of these lamps. The first column has always the number 3, the second column has always the number 4, and the last one has always the number 7. So these numbers up here, they correspond simply to the constants given down there. This means the columns decide which item types are compared, while the rows decide which comparison mode is used. So now the signal that is given to all of these lamps is a 5 iron plate signal. And now let's look which lamps turn on. For the greater than, we expect that 5 is greater than 4 or 3, so these two turn on. 5 is also only equal to itself, so in the second row only this lamp turns on. But 5 is less than 6 or 7, so only these two lamps turn in the third row. The fourth row functions exactly like that. 5 is less than or equal to itself, as well as 6 and 7, and therefore turns on these 3 lamps. 5 is only not equal to itself, so all the lamps but this one turn on in the 5th row, and for the greater than or equal, it's also clear that 5 is greater than 3, greater than 4, and equal to itself, so these 3 lamps turn on while the others don't. I encourage you to play around with this value by simply using the scroll bar and scroll to the left and right and see how these lights change and try to understand why they do this in the way they do. Once you understood how everything works, you have understood how conditions work in general, since this is not a feature that only lamps have, but many of the buildings we will examine in the future episodes of Technical Detail of Factorio will also be enabled or disabled by circuit conditions. Now let's move to the second way how lamps can react to the circuit networks, which is unique to lamps only. And that is, lamps can change their color. For this, we first need to make sure that the lamp is indeed enabled, which we can achieve by setting a condition that is true in whatever case you have. For example, I have no iron plate signal, so this iron plate signal is always 0. To then set the color of the lamp, I first need to enable this feature by checking this Use Colors checkbox, and then send a color signal down there. So, just a reminder, we have in the signal item group, we have a few colors. The first 6 of those can be chosen as color signals to send to a lamp, which will then turn to that color. So for example, if I choose a yellow signal and delete the blue one, the lamp will become yellow. Note that this requires the signal to be positive. So it can be any number you like, the lamp will stay yellow, but if it's 0 or if it's negative, the lamp will not react to it and go to its default color of white. Note also that the lamp can only show one color, so if I have a green signal and a red one, you will notice that only the red one is displayed. The color chosen is not random, it follows a certain order of precedence. To visualize this, I have set up all these lamps here, and they get a color from the constant combinators up top and from the constant combinators to the left. And I have set it up in a way that each lamp gets exactly 2 signals, and which 2 depends on its row and its column. For example, this lamp here gets a red signal from top and a red signal from the left too. I have then set all these lamps to be enabled when the iron plate signal is set to 0. So if I remove this iron signal, all these lamps turn on because they have no iron plate signal to them. Each of them gets 2 colors. The red from left and all the 6 colors that we can choose from top. The red one is always preferred, and this will always be the case no matter which values are chosen for all of these signals. In the second row, we will see that similarly green acts as the second best color. Only the red signal overrides the green one from the left, and the other 4 are not preferred compared to green. Going on to the blue signal, we see again a similar pattern. We already know that red and green are preferred to blue, so these 2 lamps are already explained, while the other 3 tell us that blue is indeed the third most preferred signal. Turning on the last 3 rows shows similar results and indeed confirms to us that the correct ordering of the signals is red, green, blue, yellow, pink, and cyan. And this already concludes the complete explanation of how lamps react to the circuit network. So let me end up with a nice simple example of how to use all of this knowledge combined. You may have sometimes the situation that you have a bunch of chests with many items in them, and you want to make an indicator light which turns red when there are not enough items in these chests and green if there are enough. So for this we will use 2 lamps and we will connect them up to all of these chests. So we first connect all of these chests together, and now this red wire will carry the signal of the whole content of all of these chests combined. I then simply connect it up to the lamps, and then set up, for example, the lamps to only turn on when the iron plate signal is less than, for example, 1000 for this lamp, and this other lamp should only turn on in the other case, which is greater than or equal to 1000. So now that we have this, I know immediately, well, we have less than 1000 iron plate in these chests. If I now simply add a few iron plates in there, the other lamp turns on. And if I take them all out again, then it's back to the first one. But this is not what we wanted. We want that this lamp is red to signify that there is not enough, while the other one should be green. For this, we want to send color signals to these lamps. And by the way, let me enable both of them to use colors, so that now when we send this signal, they immediately will turn into their respective color. Note that we can't use the red signal for this, since sending, for example, the red color signal to this lamp will also send it to this one if we use the red wire. So we need to use the green one. So let us put down a constant combinator and connect it with the green circuit wire to there. And now set here the red color signal. Similarly, the same thing goes for this lamp, which we can connect with a second constant combinator and also a green wire. Turning on the green signal. We'll now, of course, leave this lamp off since we have not enough iron plates, so adding them will now turn the green light on. So to recap, we have 3 circuit networks in this little example, a big red one, which carries the whole content of all of these chests, and 2 green ones, one of which is carrying the red color signal and one the green color signal. Then these 2 lamps simply turn on and off depending on the amount of items in these chests, one with the color of always red and the other with always green. And now that you understood this example, I will conclude this technical detail for today and wish you a nice time playing Factorio. If you're still around and want to support me a little bit more, please consider liking or subscribing, and of course if you have any suggestions or criticism towards my videos, please leave a comment so that I can improve the quality of my videos even further. See you next time!